Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Happy City Radio. My name is Jen Crowe, Chair of Happy City St. John's. And for today's different episode, as we are abiding by the public health safety regulations here and doing everything digital, we're interviewing remotely Neria Aylward, Trevor Hickey, and David Brake about the brand new platform neighboring.org. So thank you so much to each of you for taking the time to be here. And hopefully we don't have any issues with lagging and this goes very smoothly. So thanks guys for being here.
Glad to be here.
Great. Trevor, I want to start with you just to get a sense of this platform. I'm sure some of us have already heard about it. There's been some great social media and media coverage of it already. But I'm wondering if you can tell me a bit of the why behind this. Why did you feel that a platform like neighboring.org needed to exist in our community?
Sure. So the real, the nut of the idea of the concept or the need, where I felt the need came from, where I guess I felt the need was during the state of emergency. So, the state of emergency just a few months ago, we were all stuck home for 2 weeks. We had loved ones, we were removed from our loved ones, seniors and what have you. And we personally, myself and my fiance, we were removed from some loved ones. So we checked in on them all the time. And these were loved ones who otherwise, they had home care or they were seniors. So, but we checked in on them all the time. There was never a moment when us or someone else in our family wasn't connected with them. So, while everyone was physically alone, we made it a point to always check in on each other and to make sure everything was okay and anything we could do. And we felt great doing that, and we knew we were there for each other. But it did it spawned a lot of conversations between us, where we thought, it's so sad how many people out there don't have that. They don't have, they're a senior citizen, they're alone right now. They're senior citizen who usually has home care, who they just can't get it and they're scared, or someone who doesn't have that family to check in on them. So it really got us thinking about that and how nice it would be if there was just a way that you could almost address that, if we could reach out to those people. Of course, obviously that state of emergency was lifted. No idea 2 months later, here we would be in a global state of emergency, and the need now, it's the same thing again. There's no snow on the ground. Well, there's some snow on the ground, but it's even more pronounced. People you're houses down from someone, or you're still more alone. So the need for it kind of came up again. Like, there's so many people who are alone who just need someone to check in on them. So then the idea came, let's create something that builds that connection that people can use to check in on each other, so that we can find those people who are vulnerable right now. So that's that. The idea came from the state of emergency and was rebirthed during this one. And then one weekend I spent teaching myself how to basically build a Wix site, banging the idea around different colleagues of mine, friends in the community or in government, what have you. Eventually, I connected with Hope Jameson, who loved the idea and saw value in it. And she knew of another group that was tackling the same problem, but from a different angle. And that was Neria and Rabbitown Helping Hands. And we connected. It was great, obvious, energy right from the start, and that's birthed Neighboring.
Thanks, Trevor. And I think it's really interesting hearing your perspective on this. I mean, I think so many of these initiatives come from our own experience, right? Seeing folks who are in isolation, whether that's friends or family members. But I think so many of us can relate to that, and having to adapt to a different way of kind of associating with our community, getting groceries, navigating the city during Snowmageddon, and now having to do it again during COVID-19, which is of course all too soon. But I think it's a really interesting problem that you're solving for, because of course here in Newfoundland and Labrador we have a rapidly aging population where isolation and loneliness is not something that's going to be temporary. It's something that really is long term, that we're going to continue to see after COVID-19. So it sounds like this platform could potentially serve a real neighborhood purpose long after what we're seeing right now in terms of this public health emergency. So Neria, I'd love to hear a little bit from your perspective from an organizing lens. What are some of the problems that you're seeing at a community level that you think a platform like neighboring.org could help tackle?
Well, from my perspective, I organize with the Social Justice Cooperative, and our mandate is to promote anything that makes social, economic, political equality. So we really have an eye to inequity. And what we know about crises like this, and what we could just in general, things like Snowmageddon, but what we could see, because Newfoundland and Labrador, we were pretty late. Or this crisis was pretty late arriving here. You can see all around the world is what crisis does is it makes existing inequalities deeper. So these are things that we're thinking about all the time in normal times. And then as soon as we're in a time of crisis, the kind of day-to-day inequity and equities that characterize our society just get deepened. So that's the kind of mindset that we had going into this crisis, and that a lot of us were having conversations about. We're like, what is our role in making sure that what happens is that people go from being just above the poverty line to just below it, to being just above being food insecure, to becoming food insecure for the first time. For the many folks in this province who live kind of just very precariously, this kind of, when we know from the state of emergency, this kind of crisis can really be a deal breaker. And so thinking on a personal level, what we could do with this, we really just looked to what was happening all around the world. Again, we were late getting this, so we were able to see what was happening all over the world. And mutual aid really, the idea of it really took off. It's mutual aid it's something that everybody does. It's just the idea that we can help each other to serve each other's needs. It comes from an evolutionary biologist he came up with the idea, and it was speaking against the idea that we are always in competition and that's how evolution happens. He was saying that actually a lot of great things happen because members of the same species help each other all the time. And that's exactly what the idea is, that actually we can meet a lot of each other's needs, and a lot of the needs that we have during COVID can be life or death for some people, like getting food, like getting enough food, like getting your prescriptions, because maybe you're in self-isolation, maybe you're immunocompromised and have to stay home, but they're not for others. Like for me, for example, I'm young, I'm healthy, I have no problem like popping to the pharmacy. And so that's where we were we were looking at groups like Caremongering Toronto. We were looking at the NHS, even the National Health Service in England mobilized a huge task force of volunteers to deliver these kinds of goods. We also were looking to Stone Soup, which was a food sharing co-op that cropped up during the state of emergency, and we really just wanted to improve on that model a little bit. Stone Soup was amazing at collecting hundreds of requests for food and sanitary items and small things. But what we wanted to do was something a little bit more ongoing. So while Stone Soup might have had the capacity to deliver somebody food once, what we wanted is to wrap people in a social network that would make sure that they had food maybe every week. Because this is going to be a long crisis. This isn't going to be 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting too, because of course, like one of the things that Snowmageddon, I think Amy, you spoke to it so eloquently. One of the things that we saw coming out of Snowmageddon is folks who can't access food, but not just during that week. Like it's a prevalent problem, but all of a sudden, like you said, they trickle up to the surface in terms of those needs. And so I think a solution that's long-term that allows neighbors who are interested in helping, and I think if there's one thing that this whole situation has showed us is that there's tons of people who are interested in helping, but sometimes it's a matter of how and how can I maximize my efforts and how can I do the most good. So David, I'm glad that you're here because David, of course, is a director with Happy City St. John's, but also is one of the pod leads for Georgestown for neighboring.org. So David, talking about trying to fill a need, trying to meet a community need, I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to what prompted you to get involved with an initiative like this.
Well, I had actually been when the epidemic first started. I was lucky. I kind of waited out Snowmageddon in safety elsewhere. But in a way, I felt I wished I had been able to get out and help people, but I was immobile. But when the epidemic started, I came across something that Josh Smee down the road from me had come up with, which is a little handout that he suggested people post through people's letterboxes, just saying, hey, I'm down the street. If you need anything, contact me. And that stuck with me. And then it was, and in fact, I printed out some of those. I went up and down my street with them. I was thinking, if only there was a way I could do that on a bigger scale. And then I came across Rabbit Town, and it's like, you guys, that's great. This is it. What I feel that this fills a real gap, because I don't think there's any substitute to real systemic change in the long run. I think that to address some of these things, we need entities the size of governments and redistribution and all those things. So but at the same time, I think, ironically, where it can be helpful is because it's nimble, because it doesn't have all of these questions of accountability and structure and funders and all of that. It can just do stuff at a much faster rate and innovate. We've seen that with Trevor's work on the website, for example. And it's also, I think, as much as it's mobilizing people with a little bit of extra time to help, it's also, I think, lowering the threshold that people, or at least I hope, will be lowering the threshold people feel that they can ask for help. Because they're not going to a bureaucracy, they're not going to an organization, they're not justifying themselves or filling out forms or anything. They just need to call someone who's up the road and say, I can't get my groceries today, can you give me a hand? And I feel like that's, and on the flip side of that, like, I'd want to help my neighbors, and I did do some of that, but I'd feel a little awkward about just contacting people out of the blue, especially since, maybe it's because I'm a CFA. I don't have the network that would, personal relations that would get me the stories of people who needed help, right? But I know that as a CFA, if I had broken a leg, I'm lucky. I've met people. I'm fine. But I know from our work at the Neighborhood Summit, for example, that there are people who are here who just don't have a network, and I could understand where they might come from, and I felt like, what's the solution for them? And I hope that this is it. I mean, I'll just share a quick story from our Neighborhood Summit, because I thought it was really, it really made me think. One of the people who spoke there, who's a community activist herself, was nonetheless, she was stuck in her house, and she couldn't get out, and the neighbors could have got her out, but she had no way to ask them because she'd never met them. And this is, I hope, not only going to be a way that we can help people today, but a way that we can grease the gears a bit and get the neighboring going. Give it a little bit of structure, not too much, just enough to get the wheels rolling.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So this is something that's happening like in different pods across the city. I'm including Georgestown. I know we've alluded to Rabbit Town already. Trevor, I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to how does it work? So if somebody is interested in getting involved, is interested in helping their neighbors, how do they get involved with neighboring.org? And also, how do they ensure that they're connecting with people who need the assistance?
Articulate the platform, and anyway, I loved everything I just heard.
Wasn't even mine, but
so
sorry, Trevor, would you mind just starting from the beginning on that? I think we just cut you off a little bit.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I was saying I loved how David just described the platform nimble. It lowers that threshold for asking. It just makes it, and it empowers people to build their own communities. That's everything that when I started it, I was trying to go for, and I think Neria can echo that. That's everything we're going for. So anyway, I loved hearing that. Ooh, I just did it wrong. So I love that. Right. So how to get involved in the platform? platform, how to get involved. So that's, you can start a pod, you can start doing what you start just going to town with it. So if you want to sign up, you can just go on the platform. You can sign up via Facebook, via your email, and you just log in. And as soon as you log in, you get there's a step there to create your workspace, and boom, you have your workspace, and you can start organizing your town or joining other pods, organizing your street, and you can organize at any level. We have it set up so that, it's designed so that anyone who goes on the platform, if you wanted to go in there and you wanted to organize Newfoundland, you can do that. If you want to organize your street, you can do that. If you want to organize Nova Scotia, you can do that. But if you just want to get in there and just start making phone calls, it has those pieces for you to do that. It has all those. It helps to just give people those tools, like to just, okay, yep, I'm going to go there. I'm going to phone these people once a week. I'm going to check in on these people twice a week, all those different worksheets in the workspace, and so they can start working and doing that. But if you want to join that larger level, you kind of go in, you look and choose what you want to organize, be it a town, be it a street, be it a ward, or what have you, or a neighborhood. You go in there, you choose, you claim it, and you start pulling people into your team. Then you start going through, and you literally get the phone book and start going through the list and calling the people on your streets. So it's super simple, and for people who want to go in there and like make it and like go bananas, it has everything they need as well.
Excellent. It's really interesting to hear about, like, the website itself is super robust and really amazing. There's so many resources on it. Like, it's really straightforward to get involved. And I guess, like, with the creation of any new platform like this, there's like lots of bumps along the road and things that you think are going to be challenging for people. Oftentimes people end up getting it, and the things that you think are pretty straightforward, people sometimes struggle with. Or like there's tons of issues that come up around, like, how do you get the ball rolling on things? And I know you guys have gotten a lot of media uptake in the last little while. Neria, I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to, is there anything like about this process that as an organizer or co-organizer in this has surprised you about the work or about how it's landed with people?
The thing that I suppose I didn't anticipate as much is the difficulty of actually making those connections in the first place, because by the time we got this up and running, it was beyond the point where it was really kind of the right thing to do to drop people's, like David, when he was not putting flyers in people's mailboxes, that was probably when it was still okay to do that. By the time our website was up and running, we were actually very limited in the kinds of ways that you could get in touch with people. And so that's why we've had to really get creative and think about, like, picking up the phone, for example, which is so antithetical. Like, as someone, I'm 24, it disgusts me, the idea of just like cold calling someone from the phone book. But Trevor made a really good point really early on, that actually folks who, when you do a reverse search on Canada 411, you put in your street and then you get the phone numbers for everybody in your street. A lot of those folks who have landlines hooked up might be exactly those seniors who you're trying to reach. And so that's definitely been a challenge, adapting these kind of things to the conditions of COVID-19, right? I think this will be actually, and we were chatting a little bit about this before we started recording, but when COVID-19 ends, it'll be so much easier. You'll be able to just grab your friend and just knock on people's doors and drop off a plate of cookies and do all these kinds of things that we're more used to, like ways that we're more used to getting in touch with each other. We can throw barbecues and invite everyone. As coming from the social justice co-op, for example, our thing, we always throw events in town halls. You can't do that right now. So trying to figure out ways to layer all these different kinds of remote interaction. So the easy one is Facebook. I started a Facebook group for Rabbit Town, and you get a certain demographic there, but you don't get everyone. And then calls, you get a certain demographic there, but you don't get anyone. And just trying to overlap all of these. And then there's the people I know offline and friends of friends, and you try and kind of piece all these things together to make something that looks like a database, actually looks a little bit like your neighborhood, so that you're really reaching people. And I think it really reflects totally reflects the difficulty of this time, right? If it's this hard for us who are looking for folks to reach them, imagine how hard it must be for them to reach out and get the help that they need, if they do need it. So that's been what's really, I mean, I thought it would, I was like, yeah, I'll just make a Facebook group, and then realized that, you know what, not everyone uses Facebook. And it's hard people, when you can't put a face to a name, it's hard to get to know people, but we're trying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think like this whole situation is forcing us to think outside of our like boxes of communication and think about, yeah, what do you do in the absence of being able to like have that face-to-face interaction? What do you do in the absence of, like with the acknowledgement that not everyone's on social media, but you still need to reach out to them, which I think like the reverse phone lookup is brilliant. It's such simple solutions, but it's forcing us to get back down to like what are those essential ways that we can communicate with most people, which is really interesting. And so I want to kind of loop this conversation back to something that's coming up for Happy City St. John's in the next couple of weeks, which is Jane's Walks, which is a series of citizen-led walks, not walks this year, walks that are about exploring and understanding neighborhoods and communities in different ways, which is in celebration of the work of Jane Jacobs, who was the mother of city planning and really valued citizen-led organizing and city planning. So I would love to hear, thinking in the context of neighboring.org, what is your vision of a kind of a happier, brighter, more sustained, and I guess more vibrant neighborhood? And that could be, you could be speaking from the perspective of your own neighborhood or just neighborhoods in general. What is your vision for neighborhoods in the city? And maybe I'll put David on the spot first.
You know, maybe I'm just talking from a COVID-19 inflected time, but I really would like to see neighborhoods where people had more places to get together and more reasons to get together face to face. Like, I really like that now, particularly, but just in general. And maybe it's because I knew it more in other places than here in St. John's. But I mean, there's cafes. There aren't so many places where people who don't already know each other and know to seek each other out can go and hang out, and or reasons for them, like excuses, if you like, for them to go out and meet their neighbors. And I hope once we can get past the helping people survive and towards the helping people thrive part, and we can start holding more sort of block party type things, and maybe peer-to-peer childcare, or any of those things which get people to meet each other. The more we meet each other, the more we get to know each other, the more neighborhoods can thrive in a real sense, not just as a geographical area, but as an organism, a self-healing organism, if you like.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. And I keep thinking back to what it must feel like for somebody who's not from this province, or perhaps not even from the city, to come to one of the many neighborhoods in our city. And how do they meet their neighbors? How do they find out about the event that's going on, or the person who like often hosts kitchen parties or whatever? And how long does that take? And if we want to create a city and a province where people can come here and live here and stay here, which is what we just so desperately need as a population, then I think that part of that is creating those neighborhoods and those communities where people can feel that they belong, and that they feel attached to. So I definitely see a platform like this in kind of sparking that and beginning that kind of process of connecting neighbors who perhaps wouldn't otherwise have the opportunity to be connected. So Trevor, I'd love to hear from you a little bit about, thinking about as one of the co-founders of this initiative, what is, if we could look, a year or 2 years or 3 years down the road, which I know is hard to do right now, What would be your vision for stronger neighborhoods here in the city?
I guess to me, stronger neighborhoods, I guess to get there and to what defines the neighborhood, to me, it all goes down to like empathy and people connecting. Uh, you know, if you kind of think about like the opposite of Twitter, we're on Twitter. It's these people go over here, these people go over here. This person makes a comment free of context that offends this person who says something else free of context that offends. Everyone just kind of goes to their side. But if you've ever met anyone who you've ever had an argument with on Twitter, and you've had a connection, and you spoke with them, and all of a sudden you realize they're not cartoons, they're real people. They're real people, and yeah, they had an opinion that might have seemed out there, but you realize, maybe where they're coming from. Okay, yeah, that's reasonable. They're actual good people. I think something like a space where people connect that can develop that empathy, that shows that we are all that we're all people, and and then recognizing that that rarely is anyone coming from is anyone purposefully bad or mean or not no one actually thinks they're bad or mean, or that they're behaving badly, and I think once you kind of get that, and something like this in a neighborhood where people are connecting and feel connected and have those opportunities to connect, I think that's what I'd love to see. And as for like say a platform like this or something like this, I think a tangible benefit that could come from something like that, like let's say neighboring as an example, in 6 months, a year, 2 years, how this exists. Uh, Something like I think about, if I'm connected with people, and we're talking about before about enabling, about how something like this enables people to kind of connect with one another. If there was someone, if I have extra food in my pantry and things like that, like it's not, and there was a network like this, something that where someone could quickly do, oh, hey, on Sundays we do a food drive to bring to the local food bank. Just put something in your mailbox or buy it. Someone for every street or something like that. Yeah, it seems like we have scarce resources, but when everyone's connected, when you have these tools that are enabling people to realize that, yeah, you know what, I kind of have what people need, and to me, I have excess of that thing. So this means less to me. It means more for me to give that to someone, like something like this enables that. So I think that's my long answer. A neighborhood that's connected, that's empathetic, and that's realizing that its resources aren't as scarce as we think they are.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting. And I'm like kind of hearing from that, it's like, how do we develop a culture of generosity? One where if we have excess, we have more than what we need, then we don't think about how do we, we're going to hold on to that. And for a rainy day, we think about, well, is there a part of that I can lend to someone else, someone who needs it right now? And like, that's kind of what I'm thinking about with this whole platform, is that we're creating a bit of like a systemic change around how we think about our neighbors and how we take care of each other. Because the other side of this is that the folks who perhaps are needing food or needing help with getting medicine, it could be you at some point, right? Like there's things that happen in all of our lives that change our situation and change our needs. So, if we're hoping that down the road there will be people who are able to support us, then I think the best way to do that is to ensure that you're doing everything you can right now to support others. So Neria, I'm going to give you the floor for your kind of thoughts around a vision for neighborhoods into the future, and how you feel that neighboring might be supporting that.
Well, yeah, I would echo obviously a lot of what all three of you have said already. For me, it's kind of what's interesting about a neighborhood is it brings all sorts, and especially in St. John's, our neighborhoods aren't, I wouldn't say as stratified as somewhere like in Toronto or in Vancouver, where you can't afford to be near someone somewhere if it's a certain price. Our neighborhoods are actually, and especially I'm speaking from a kind of downtown perspective, are actually pretty mixed. And I think that's something that we should really value. But as David kind of mentioned, we don't actually really we need more excuses to get to know the people around us. And what's great about having new people arrive in a neighborhood, there's kind of no, if you don't meet each other, right? And I think that this is that creating these kind of strong neighborhood networks, and maybe these can be the basis of a neighborhood association in a couple of years from now. What that means is just that there's that extra level of a social net, an extra level of that social fabric that brings folks together who haven't necessarily chosen to be together. I think that that's really valuable, is creating networks creating really inclusive networks that are different from the ones that we already have. And that's something, I guess, maybe, and it's interesting. We're not the kind of, when I moved, I'm a renter, and I moved here to Rabbit Town about 6 months ago. And it wasn't the kind of situation where you move in and like the neighbors bring you cookies. Like, we're not there yet. I think that would be really cool if we got there, and so that everyone can feel like they really belong somewhere. And that's really somewhere to start when you're new to a place. So yeah, that's a lot of feelings, right? But it would be cool to be able to just like walk outside and know everyone. And they don't have to, and it's just, again, another kind of, we're social beings. Like, that's what humans are. That's what we do, is we socialize with each other. And we feel, every study, so many studies have shown it's such a central part of our well-being, is the more kind of ways that we identify and feel that we belong, the healthier we are and the more that we thrive. And this is just hoping that we can create another way for humans to connect.
Great. Well, thank you folks so much. Any initiative with a vision of cookies is one that I'm here for. So I really want to thank each of you for being here, and I want to thank all of you for your contributions towards neighboring, because I think it's a wonderful platform, and it's creating a great conversation in our city around how do we support those who are vulnerable right now, and I think more broadly than that, how do we work towards systemic change that ensures that folks don't live in a state of poverty and that they can access the resources that they need every day. So if folks are interested in finding out more about you, it's neighboring.org, and they can find you on Facebook and Twitter as well. And this is a platform that's open to anyone who's interested in getting involved. It can be as simple as taking the initiative to call a few folks in your neighborhood, and that's really it. So I definitely encourage people who are interested in getting involved and contributing during this stressful time to have a look at that website. And thank you folks so much.
And don't forget to ask us for help too. Feel free to go to the site, register your needs. No problem too small to fix. Well, help with.
Great. Thanks so much, folks. We'll see you later.